AI to Go podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the AI to Go podcast. For today, we are interviewing Mariano Kostelec. He's a serial entrepreneur who lived in 10 different countries and raised over 75 million in funding across all his many ventures, among which we remember Uniplaces, which is one of the leading housing platforms in Europe, StudentFinance, and Mydra, which is an AI-powered career mobility platform that basically facilitates the reskilling of the global workforce, mainly focusing on the digital and green transition. So we're going to talk about all these. Mariano is basically blending education and AI to create the workforce of the future. And of course, we're very excited to get to know more about these ventures and the human behind the AI. But before we get into the conversation, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any interesting conversations. All right, guys, let's get started.
Welcome, Mariano.
Thank you.
You lived in 10 different countries, and I saw on your LinkedIn that you speak 6 different languages. What made you change so much? What motivates you to relocate constantly and live in different countries and cultures?
Yeah. So I speak a few languages, but none of them perfectly. So a bit of each, I would say. But English is good enough, so I'm fine with that. But actually, look, I was born in Argentina. I grew up there. But my family, let's say my grandparents, they are originally from Slovenia. When I was 12 or 13 years old, we moved with my family to France. So it was my first move abroad kind of experience. We stayed there near Paris for about 2 years. And then my parents decided to move to Slovenia, which is, let's say, the origin, because they were also raised in Argentina, but all of their parents, all of my grandparents are from Slovenia. So that's why we moved there. And when I was there, obviously I moved from Buenos Aires, a very large city, to Paris, then to a small town in Slovenia, which is beautiful green country. But I was thinking, what am I going to do for university, right? And when I finished high school, I looked at a few options, looked at going back to France, looked at Germany, which a lot of people from Slovenia end up going there. It's kind of closer geographically, or the UK or elsewhere. So I ended up going to London to study. I studied there for a few years, and then I started, I moved to Asia for a couple of years, which we can talk a bit more in detail. I was working there. Then I moved back to Europe and jumped around a little bit for a variety of reasons. When I launched my first businesses, then we were expanding internationally, and I was always the one, let's say, planting the flags, running the international teams and so on. So yeah, that led me to ending up moving quite a bit.
And Mariano, with such an international experience, is there a place that you really consider home? You mentioned you grew up in Argentina, so maybe it's that one. And of this country that you consider home, how did it shape your view of the world?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because after moving around a few times, and I don't have, for example, family in Argentina anymore. So even though Argentina, I culturally feel connected, I don't really have family and some friends from very long ago. So it's hard to say I really feel that's my home because I don't really have any concrete attachment there. So I was always the person that is not from there. So you kind of get used to that. So I think I adopted more the mindset that I'm not from a country, or geographically speaking from a place like that. I see every place has, pros and cons, good and bad things. You end up, balancing it out to the best that can work for you. For me, I don't think it was one place that shaped my mindset or anything specifically, but was this journey, I would say. The most important thing I would say is the first time, to be honest, when I moved to France, I went to an international school. And obviously I moved from Argentina, where I never left the country, to move to Europe. I was, I think, 12 or 13, to an international environment for the first time. And that's when I got connected with people from literally every country. And that for me was very opening, very interesting experience that made me think in a completely different way. And I think that kind of started that journey of, I feel it's normal to move to another country, to connect with people from different cultures, both, when you work or when you move somewhere. And I actually, feel that's the way things should be now, as opposed to, you're in one location and so on. And actually, yeah, obviously with launching businesses online, internet businesses, or with the AI revolution now, look, the world is more connected than ever, despite geopolitics and things like that, which we can leave aside for now. Yeah, the world is very connected, and I think that's how things should be. And I like, to interact and to work with people from a variety of backgrounds, cultures, etc.
Besides all the packing and unpacking, the getting on and off the planes to travel from one country to the other, and besides all the businesses that you built, what do you do in your free time, if you have any?
Yeah, no, it's hard to say free time per se when you're building your own business, because it's maybe different to when you have a job where you people talk about this work-life balance and that kind of stuff. But when you launch your own businesses, you do it because you want to do it, right? No one is forcing you to do it. It's, so it becomes your thing and you just blend it. So there's not so much free time, but still, of course, it's important to take some time for things. I personally like to do sports, things from going to the gym, to do kite surfing, to do skiing, things like that. That also allows me to, let's say, disconnect. And those moments are actually very important, right? Because you can be focusing on doing things like moving faster after every single thing that you need to do. But if you don't have those moments that you can disconnect and, connect with yourself or whatever, I think you miss something. So yeah, I like to do that. And for me, that I think is a very important part.
Mariano, you look like the perfect fit on paper, right? So give us something. What is your best kept guilty pleasure? Something that you're really ashamed of saying?
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure. Well, I said I like to do sports, but I love Argentinian dulce de leche, which is this delicious sweet that, you should not eat too much, but I love to eat it just with a spoon. So yeah, that kind of stuff.
That's a fair guilty pleasure. Switching to your career journey, you started in banking and worked for Goldman Sachs and a few other big banks. Now, the banking sector is quite different from the startup experience.
Yeah.
What did you learn during your time in banking, and how did you survive in that environment?
Yeah. So I spent, it was my first real job, let's say, at Goldman Sachs in London. When you're new to banking, everything's impressive, these big offices, people wearing suits, all these kinds of things. You meet a lot of super smart people, so that is really, impressive and amazing from this kind of environment. Now, for me personally, when I was there, obviously I tried to do my best. I was there, but I didn't feel I belonged there. You see, when you ask me for what country do you belong to, maybe I don't have the good answer for the country, but for the bank, I kind of felt that I didn't belong to that kind of, it was not the bank per se, it was more the corporate environment, let's say, large corporate, large organization, where even though you're doing, a lot of work, you're a small puzzle, a small piece of that big puzzle, right? And it was not motivating, you see. You feel that even if you don't do anything, or if you do a lot, or if you do good or bad, nothing really changes. And that is not so, let's say, motivating to be driven, to wake up every day, to go to work and push things forward, right? So for me, when I moved from banking and, let's say, the corporate environment to startups, was extreme opposite, where you felt you could do literally anything and everything. And there was no such boundaries. And more than that, the work you were doing had like an immediate impact on things that was clear, obvious. It happened because you made it happen. And if you would not do what you did, that things would not have happened. That's for me very empowering. And obviously then when you add value to customers, to users, to partners, and so on, you see that. And my first real, let's say, startup experience was also very, let's say, an extreme opposite from the corporate environment, because I literally moved from Goldman Sachs in London. I joined Groupon, when the company was one of the fastest growing companies in the world at the time. I think it just raised $1 billion funding, so it was in a super fast global expansion phase. I went to I joined the expansion team in Asia, first in Japan and then in China. Obviously, coming from Goldman Sachs, where I had like a 2 or 3 months long onboarding process with all the training and everything you need. On my first day, I landed in Japan. I was asked, there's like these 2 or 3 different departments, pick one, and from tomorrow on, you need to run it. And that was on my day 1 on the job in Japan, which it was the first time I got there. So you see immediately how you're thrown to the deep end. You need to make things happen, but that's how you also learn super fast. And I think I actually, for me, was an exciting adventure and a really interesting experience. And I obviously like much more to drive things in that shape. So obviously since then I started to build different companies, but it was clear that moving from that first banking experience to the startup world was the right transition for me to make.
You were just mentioning that you work for like the rocket internet companies Groupon and also Wimdu in Asia, right? To scale across Asia Pacific. Did you work with Oli Samwa directly? And how was your experience in the rocket internet work culture back in the early 2010s?
Exactly. So I didn't report directly to Oli, but I came across him a few times. He was very intense. So just an example of what happened. I went to Tokyo for the first time in my life. I said bye to all my friends in London. I said, I'm not going to come back for probably a long time. I don't know. I went to Tokyo. I spent there a week, Monday to Friday. And I was thinking Friday, maybe Saturday, I'll be able to rest, see the city and so on. And they told me, my manager said, hey, do you want to go to some training with Oliver Zamor? And it's very important and all of that. And I said, yes, absolutely. Why not? And they said, okay, it's in London. You need to go back tomorrow morning on the first plane back to London for 3 days to do training and then come back. So you see, Friday, when I was expecting to then enjoy the weekend, I packed my bag again. Saturday morning, flew to London. We did 3 days of training with Oliver Zamor, literally 8 a.m. till 11 p.m. every day, non-stop, almost no break, like super, super intense, very useful. They brought a lot of the teams from the different international teams and offices and so on. So it was for me a first, impression of, how intense and driven they are, and obviously really focus on fast execution, which is what Groupon and Rocket Internet was all about. This is the playbook, this is how you run it, this is how you operate it. And I spent 3 days in London and flew back to Japan to actually, put things in practice. And that was my first Oliver Zamor experience.
Well, hopefully when you started your companies, it was a little bit more chill, although I know from experience it wasn't the case, because one of the companies you built was Uniplaces, which actually we met because I was working at one of your competitors. So that's how we got to know each other the first time. And Uniplaces, for those of you who don't know, is actually a student housing platform. And then your next company, which is StudentFinance, actually also focuses a little bit on the same demographic, because you basically help people upskilling, making it more accessible, providing financing, right? So it seems like you have a bit of a love for this demographic, right? Which is tend to be students and young professionals. Why is that? Why are you so committed to this demographic?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had like a strategic answer there, but I think it was more of a coincidence, because Uniplaces, even though it's very student and young professional focused, it's also a real estate platform, right? So it's a marketplace. So when I was at Groupon, then I supported the team at Wimdu, expanding in Asia as well. Wimdu is an Airbnb competitor launched by Rocket Internet as well, right? So I joined that when Airbnb was still a lot earlier than it is now. Now it's obviously a monster. Wimdu was a strong competitor. I was helping setting it up in Asia. And it was at a time that I was discussing with my co-founders that from Uniplaces about launching like an Airbnb, but for longer durations. And that, the idea was not fully formed, but then we've seen clearly how young professionals, students who need a place to stay for a few months to a year, they don't really have any good service. You have the Airbnbs emerging, Airbnb, Wimdu, etc., which is short stays, tourist accommodation, etc. And then on the other side, you had like the typical real estate portals where you go to rent a house for 2 years or buy a house, right? And they're usually unfurnished. And it's, if you're moving from Brazil to Spain or to Portugal for a semester of university or for a project at work, neither of those solutions are good, right? You need an apartment for 6 months that is ready to move in, fully furnished. And that's how we actually built Uniplaces. And I think obviously, you could see it's focused on students, it's focused on young professionals, but that's how the business emerged. We've seen clearly there's a big demand and need in that space. This we started in Europe. Actually, I came back to Europe after that experience in Japan and China. We started Uniplaces in Portugal, which is where we kind of settled for the time being and expanded across Europe. But it's true that when we were building Uniplaces, there were a lot of people asking about things like even financing the rent, which I was very surprised. What could that look like? Because the rent is already paid in installments, so how you can finance installments? Anyway, we were starting to think about those more finance, fintech driven, or focused solutions in the market. And that's where we start to come across, a lot of, again, students, but more broadly, people doing training of any shape and form also require a very easy way to pay certain things in installments or in a flexible way. And this led to the idea of, after, 5-6 years of building Uniplaces, to launch the next venture, which, started StudentFinance and focus on a specific category which was growing extremely fast at the time. And actually, when we talk about AI, maybe things are shaping a bit different. There was a shortage of developers or data scientists, cybersecurity specialists across everywhere, right? And anyone that could remotely code a bit of Python would get insane job offers immediately. So there was a lot of these training programs emerging to train people for these jobs. So it was literally, you learned how to program, you do a boot camp of 3-4 months, very intense. After the bootcamp, you're almost guaranteed a web developer or data analyst or similar jobs. What these companies were lacking was, again, access to financing, right? Because these bootcamps were quite expensive, 5 to 10K euros, dollars tickets, typically. So what we built is a solution to enable these people that wanted to transition, like let's say reskill to these jobs that were in huge shortage, in a structure that they would basically pay only after completing the training and getting a job. And the payments would be structured as a percentage of the income they would generate. So it was a win-win for everyone. Like the bootcamps would basically eliminate the friction that they had for people signing up. And for all the people that wanted to transition to much higher paying jobs, this was amazing. And for me, it was really, back to the impact story, right? When you're at Goldman Sachs doing some spreadsheets or, doing some specific work there versus you see a person that moves from, a really low paid job to a data analyst in a, famous tech company and jumping income 4 or 5 times. It's amazing to see that. And that's what we enabled with StudentFinance. So you see, it's kind of an evolution of how things evolved. It's not so much focused on students from a university type of students perspective, right? It's much more on this career mobility transition perspective, right? And we've seen a huge opportunity and need in that space, which as we grew the company, we obviously then had to overcome a lot of different challenges from regulatory barriers. It's a fintech business, it's a lending activity. You need regulatory licenses. We had to go through long processes with the FCA, for example, in the UK, etc. We had to raise debt capital, which again was a completely different, world than raising equity, but to provide, the financing to actually be able to support these people. But as we were expanding that, StudentFinance, supporting, thousands of people into these transitions, what started to emerge more and more was that, okay, we're supporting the people that are moving from outside, let's call it the industry, to tech jobs or to this industry, right? To companies, actually to organizations. But what we've seen is that actually the majority of people are already employed with in companies, and they also move, reskill, upskill, change, and there is also a huge need to enable them to do that better. And I think that's where we start to launch the next business, which is, it's still StudentFinance, the new product of StudentFinance, actually, which is Mydra. But supporting a lot more the upskilling of people. The initial concept that we start to explore is, okay, we've been doing financing for people reskilling, let's do financing for people upskilling, right? But when you do that, we start to realize it's not just about financing, it's more about knowing, you're moving from your current, you have certain projects at your work, you need to acquire certain skills to get better or to do certain things. or now with AI, every job is being disrupted, and we can talk a lot more about that. So you need to get training into all of the new technologies, new tools, new things, new ways of operating. And that is not just about the financing, because, for some courses that are more expensive, you need financing. For other ones that are cheaper or even free, you don't necessarily need the financing. But you need also to enable people to understand what are the objectives that your company has, your job has, that you have. What is your current skill set, your current expertise, and how to get you from A to B. So that's where we start to develop and complement essentially career mobility solutions, copilots to enable people to understand what skills gaps they got, and give them a very personalized plan of saying, hey, you need to learn this skill to complete this project at your current role. And this is 2 courses that you can do that will help you to achieve that exact thing, right? And we've seen this was really needed because, again, in this industry, there has been a lot of platforms emerging over the last, let's say, 5-10 years, like Coursera, Udemy, which tend to be catalogs of courses, but you have like 5,000 courses to choose from. And then people do not know of these 5,000 courses, which one should they do and why. So they get lost, and then what they do nothing, right? So that's what happens to a lot of people. So what we've done is actually, solutions that actually enable the person to really get the plan personalized for them with 2 or 3 courses picked specifically for them. And obviously we integrated all of our financing solutions to make sure that there's no friction whatsoever, right? If the course is free or cheap, you probably can just pay it yourself or your employer. You can then pay it in installments. We've been also integrating things like tax benefits. There is a number of, in different countries, different solutions, but we want to make sure that people can make the most usage of those offerings, especially in Europe. We've been focusing, starting, that in Spain, which was our first market to kind of launch this new product. And there's a lot of these structures that people should take advantage. So we integrated everything nicely into the product.
Great. And Mariano, you already told us everything about Mydra, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper on that. But before we move into really the AI solution that you're building, it really seems like at the end of the day, every business you built so far was really like sort of a natural evolution of the market, right? So let's say one of the guiding principles is really like we build something that the market wants, but on a more personal level, right? So what are let's say the top 3 core values that really drive you in these missions, right? Why do you do it? What are your personal values?
So yeah, it's a good question. I think, when you're looking at personal values that drive you, for me, one is I want to make an impact always. So this is something, as I said, even before, the reason why I didn't like that much the corporate is because I didn't feel that immediate impact, right? So that's absolutely number one. Then, look, I would say I'm a curious person. You see, I want to keep exploring, trying new things, so this is definitely part of that. If things are kind of the same for too long, I get bored, so I need to see what's the next thing always, which is potentially good and bad, right? Sometimes you need to actually stick to what's good and what works and not, keep trying different things. But for me personally, I want to move things ahead, move forward, try new things, see what you see. You said the market's moving. You want to keep paying attention to what's happening, what are the needs and opportunities that are emerging, and how you can do something there. I think those are probably, key drivers. There's definitely a lot more than that, but those are probably 2 important ones that I would say, are always there and make you want to do things and move forward and, launch a new business or, build a new solution and test it and bring it to market.
It sounds great. And I think this is also fully embodied or embedded in the DNA of Mydra. Now, as you talked about, you want to create impact as an entrepreneur. And I think this is like one of the strongest driving forces. Can you walk us through a real world example where Mydra helped an individual or like an organization make a breakthrough in their transformation in digital or green, in the green space?
Yeah, exactly. Look, so I give a couple of examples here. Like, for example, like we work with some, let's say, tech consultancies. And one example concretely there is that a lot of consultants that work project. The work is usually project based, and between projects they tend to have sometimes a few days, a few weeks, or potentially a month or so, almost a gap when a project finishes and another one starts, right? So for the large consultancies, a key question is how you can maximize the usage of that empty time, right, on the bench, how they call it. One obvious thing is to provide training, right, and to get additional skills, additional training that are useful for the next project, but also to pitch new projects down the line. And this is an example where a lot of these tech consultancies, and we work with some of them, particularly in Spain, they didn't have any efficient way of doing that for hundreds of consultants, right? And with Mydra, this became obviously a very simple thing, because we have AI solutions that take as input all of the data from those people, so from their current past experience. We inject data from the projects and things that are coming up, as well as the timing of those projects. So then the output is, hey, you have these 2 weeks here in June that you're basically in between projects. Your next project requires you to have very advanced Salesforce skills, for example, right? And here are 2 courses that you can do in those 2 weeks that are really important for that. And not just that, because obviously I mentioned that we integrate all of the financing options. So we integrate with, if the company has learning budgets, for example, that they can use, our system takes into account that, right? For example, if the company is providing, covering obviously this cost, which in the case of consultancies for this use case, it is. If this was not the case and the person wants to actually do a training, they can just pay and split the payment. This for me is an example that, it's clear how you help an entire organization, right? Then on an individual basis, both from the original journey of StudentFinance to Mydra, there's plenty of cases, as I said. For me, the most impactful are of the people that actually, through, especially because of the financing of the training, enables them to actually unlock a new career opportunity. And we had a lot of these cases of people that work in restaurants, or people like in global Uber drivers, that they're doing that because they need to earn money, but it's never enough to push themselves ahead. They do this bootcamp or this specific training where obviously we facilitate the financing so they can pay later. And on the back of that, they move from just driving, let's say, Uber or that kind of jobs to get a real full-time jobs, data analysts, or, we have a lot of cases of engineers that moved into tech roles through these kind of things. And yeah, we actually kind of been shifting from enabling only individual use cases, individual users, to more a B2B corporate or, company platform, which Mydra is much more focused on companies and organizations, to enable them in this, transition with a big focus on the objectives, right? Because the question that we always had is, there's a lot of training out there and a lot of resources, and you can get lost in all of that information. But how you pick what to do, it needs to be very focused on, focus on your immediate job or immediate objective, right? And that's where, again, integrating AI into our platform enables us to understand, okay, these are your projects now, this is your work, this is your role, this is the gaps you have, or one is you want to upskill into some complete new area. Another one is you might just need to learn a new tool that will allow you to do your job better. And you can see the impact immediately. You take an Udemy course, or you take a certification of some shape or some type, and then you can apply it immediately to your role. And that's what we are working on, measuring more and more, that immediate impact, because that's why when people see that let's say that impact immediately, they understand, okay, the learning or the training I'm doing is really helpful, really useful. Because that's, I think, traditionally some of the challenge that we've seen a lot of people and organizations had, is training sounds like either for a lot of people a waste of time or a waste of money. And that's interesting, because that perspective is they just don't know why they're doing it, right? You cannot justify the ROI of that time or money spent, right? If you can justify the ROI, this is actually the exact opposite. It's the best investment you can do is invest in yourself and build skills that help you move yourself ahead as a person. And when you do it for a lot of people, as an organization, right? But yeah, this is maybe some examples that, I think how the solution we're building really makes, an impact there and enables organizations to move ahead, which we're focusing, as I said, now more and more on AI training as well, because that's where literally I would say every person needs to learn how to use the new technologies, the new tools, the new ways of working that are emerging. And I think that organizations that are not adopting that first, the mindset, the leadership, and then the actual execution of making happen, they will eventually stay behind because, AI powered people and organizations will jump ahead a lot faster.
Mariano, I think you bring up a very good point. And since now you're going more into the B2B side of things, right? I guess you already had some calls with companies, maybe some big organizations. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that companies are making as they're trying to prepare for the future of work, right? So really in terms of upskilling, reskilling their teams, maybe even hiring.
Yeah, sometimes people think that if things work, they will continue working. That's obviously a very false assumption. Obviously, with AI, this is an absolutely game changer. I think what we're seeing now is small teams can achieve a lot of things that typically would require much larger teams. And that is a very challenging concept to understand for especially large established organizations that have been doing something for a long time. And they don't understand that suddenly a smaller team elsewhere could do the same thing that they're doing much more efficiently. But the opportunity there is to actually upskill and train their existing workforce, because you combine let's call it the domain expertise, the industry, the market, or, the technicalities of that area with, let's say, obviously AI to make that a lot better. And I think that's where, a lot of people miss a bit that point and don't do stuff. I think the other one is that, especially in, let's say, AI is changing very fast, right? ChatGPT launched like 2 years ago or a bit more than that, but that sounds like decades ago now. There's so many things happened since then. And I think people sometimes think that they need to just fully understand everything before committing to anything. But I think with AI is more about, you need to experiment, you need to try. You need to, obviously try to apply it to something useful. But even if it's just to try to see how it works, you need to do that. If you don't, the skills gap, the AI skills gap, is just becoming larger and larger every day because of the pace of innovation and change. Like, if you haven't used ChatGPT and these copilots to help you with whatever, improving how you write an email, to make a presentation, and now you see completely agentic systems that can automatically and independently do huge workflows automatically, it's getting harder and harder for you to understand where did this come from. But if you start obviously continuously using the new solutions and trying them and actually trying to apply them to your work, it's a gradual journey. And I think that goes back to, look, Mydra and StudentFinance, it's all about learning, and AI is a perfect concept now, which requires, I would say, for now, lifelong learning for everyone, because it's continuously evolving and you need to be on top of what's going on. So yeah, I think organizations sometimes miss that from, it doesn't look like a priority, or it's not obviously immediately clear to them how they should apply this. And that's why they don't try. And I think the not trying is then costing them more, because the more you wait, the worse it gets.
That's an interesting thesis. And of course, a lot of organizations are struggling with how they adapt to AI and like where to focus on first, right? Asking you as, I would say, like on the service delivery side of things, how do you see the relationship between AI, upskilling, and job security evolving over the next few years?
Yeah. So literally this week, the CEO of Anthropic made two very bold statements, which I think it's interesting because they seem to contradict each other, right? On one side, he said he expects by literally next year to see $1 billion companies built by one person. Literally, one person, $1 billion business. Like, how obviously super powered by AI. It's someone that's automating everything, building a fully AI first business, marketing runs automatically, product is built with AI, everything AI. So it sounds like there is like no better time to build stuff, right? And it's getting easier and easier, right? Like a software, you can now just prompt and it creates a website for you, right? So that on one side. So it seems that the opportunities are everywhere, insane. It's democratizing access to intelligence, which is for me really amazing, right? But that's one side of the story, which is really the optimistic one, the amazing one. But then he made the other statement, which was in the next, I forgot the timeline, but next, let's say 5 years or so, he expects half of the entry-level jobs to disappear. Like, you say, which seems like, okay, there's no jobs, but suddenly people can do billion-dollar businesses. What does that mean? But if you start understanding what does mean in practice, is that a lot of what you would call entry-level jobs today tend to be the manual tasks that kind of the senior people don't want to do, and they give it to the junior people. And that's the entry-level work in many large organizations today, right? The thing is, a lot of these, let's call it simple or more boring or not exciting tasks, everything from engineering to consulting to insurance business to whatever it is, a lot of these tasks are getting automatable by AI, right? AI can actually do most of that work. Now, what is important is obviously for everyone to understand that's the case, and you should not expect to have a job that would do those tasks that, we take for granted now, but they will be, something no one want to do in the future. And people need to actually, again, understand that obviously the expectations also now is that if you look for a job, you will not there's going to be no jobs for these kind of tasks, let's call it, right? But there's going to be a huge amount of opportunity and jobs for things that you can do using AI, right? And I think that's the whole concept of, it seems like a complete contradiction because, those jobs will disappear, and it makes sense. They're like, it's literally like looking, hundreds of years ago, like the main job people were doing was farming, right? And technology eliminated a lot of these jobs. Obviously, now I think only 3% of the population in Europe and the US works in farming or so. Before it was like 90 plus, right? Now it's only 3%, right? But so these jobs were gone. Like there's no farming jobs anymore, apart from 3% that are obviously supported by much more advanced technology and systems and so on, right? But the same is happening for a lot of these jobs that exist today. They will look in 5 years from now or in 10 years from now, like we look now back at the farming jobs, right? That were not good, not exciting. They were like physically demanding. And actually a lot of the office jobs today are literally boring jobs. So if you look what tasks people do, they're not fulfilling, and people just do them, but they're not exciting. And I think AI, obviously, as I said, it's interesting for me. It's democratizing literally intelligence, if you look at it like that. So the access to information, the access to intelligence, it's available to everyone, and you should expect to use it and like use intelligence for something that requires intelligence, not for a copy paste activity that you were doing manually in the past that now AI can copy paste 1,000 times a minute better than everyone is doing. So I think it is that, and I do think actually a new technology opens much more opportunities than destroys. AI is clearly that. I think what people are afraid is that it changes a lot of the assumptions people were having, right? And I think that's why the best way to face that is to embrace it as much as possible, right? Try to learn it, use it, try it for your work, for your personal stuff, and it is a technology that's going to actually completely redefine a lot of how things are done today, right? Including jobs and other things, right? But that's why, again, it's important to adopt it. Imagine you would not want to use the internet 20 years ago when the internet was emerging, or you would not want to use a mobile phone when the mobile phone was, I think AI is now the next evolution that requires everyone to adopt it and use it and learn it. And I think people will see that so many more things are possible that before they were just not. And maybe just to conclude, the whole concept of, I think there's going to be much more people launching their own businesses, their own ideas, their own initiatives, because it's the barriers to entry are lowering. Let's say in the past, you couldn't build a website. You need to hire developers. But what if you have no money to hire developers? You just don't have a website, right? Now, suddenly, everyone can build a website because you have a lot of these tools that you can just write and they can do it for you. The same with other things. And it's giving access to opportunity to people that previously did not exist. And I think that's where people need to be looking, okay, how can I use this technology to make my life better, to create more value, to test new things and bring ideas to life? Because I think that's one thing that AI is really powerful and really good. And it's perfect time to explore and to test and use it.
Great insight. Thanks for sharing, Mariano. That's really interesting. I was just wondering, because the general answer that Mydra brings up here is upskilling, right? Now let's try to break that down a little bit. If you could give some advice for a person that just started, maybe is in their 20s and just wants to get their first role, for a person that is in the mid of their career, say in their 40s, and needs to upscale because they still need to work for 15, 20 years, and then a person in their 60s who's about to go for retirement and doesn't know what to do with this new technology. What would be your advice for these three different personas?
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about generative AI and all of these compared to other technological revolutions is that actually to learn it, it's the easiest technology to learn if you really start focusing on it. Why? Look, you can just write in English to all of the systems and they can do a lot of stuff. Like you don't need to have some very technical expertise and knowledge today to use AI. You literally open to the very bare minimum ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, any of these AI platforms. You can ask it to come up with a business plan for you. You can ask how you can improve your career. You can ask how I can, whatever, automate certain items, how I can launch a new business, or whatever, like any specific knowledge and information you need to or want to acquire. You just go and write it in plain English. And you get the level of information of some of the best experts in the world just given to you there. So what does it mean? Someone, let's start from the older generation. You said someone in their 60s. You see, typically people, the older they get, the harder to adopt new technologies, but this is actually probably the easiest technology to adopt. And I think that is something that, yeah, it's still new, and everyone, the older people get, new things are sometimes, you don't adopt them as quickly, but being so easy, I think it's different from other things, right? Then people in their 40s or mid-career and so on, this is exactly what I was saying before, and I think that's maybe where Mydra type of platforms are really key, is because you need to actually advance your career. Your jobs will be evolving. You need to keep planning your next 5-10 years of your career, and you need to learn new skills. Absolutely. And that is the commitment to lifelong learning, the commitment to be curious, want to move ahead. It needs to be driven by each person. Look, even people that have jobs, like you can look top down or bottom from a company perspective or from an employee or individual perspective. I believe obviously organizations should power and support the development of their teams, but at the end of the day, it's also the responsibility of every person to want to make that, want to move themselves ahead, right? Because if you don't want to be, regardless of what the organization is trying to do, you will not succeed, right? So I think it needs to be a personal agenda of every person, a commitment to lifelong learning and acquire new knowledge and skills, right? That's the mid-career type of profile. And then for the people just starting out, this is, I think, the best time ever, right? Because you have such powerful technology available to you that, to be honest, like anyone, any age can actually start using. Obviously, you can learn it to different levels of degrees. But what I was very impressed personally in the last, 6 months to a year, we started to see more and more companies started by 17, 18-year-old people that are doing millions in revenue really fast. Obviously, these people are born or not born, but they come to the workforce, or not even the workforce. They're in high school or in university, and they have access to this technology, and it's the first thing they come across. They don't know anything else. So obviously, for this generation, is actually really amazing, because suddenly you have an amazing opportunity. But again, like, it depends. Are you the one driven there trying to build something using these technologies, or you're 18, 20, and you just go out partying and don't care? I think it's actually a really great opportunity to embrace it at that age. And you can see a lot of new startups or, very small teams, 2, 3, 4 people that get together and build like an app that suddenly, runs like $1 million in revenue, like in a matter of, months or a year or two, right? So this was not possible before, right? And you see how this is democratizing access to so much knowledge, information, intelligence, that I think it's, I'm very optimistic on what AI can bring. But I think the common, how would you say, trade, or the common thing between all of these is, are you embracing it or are you not, right? And I think that depends on each person. And I think the right answer is absolutely you should embrace it. The more, the better. And if you do, you'll get amazing opportunities. If you don't, you will be staying behind more and more, because the people that do will be making huge jumps ahead really quickly.
Great. And Mariano, at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do with the Mydra, right? So in one sentence, if you could fast forward to 2035, let's say, so 10 years from now, what's that one thing that you hope Mydra has accomplished in the world? So what is your biggest hope for Mydra?
Yeah, look, I think back to the point of committing to lifelong learning and so on. I think today people just are used to, waking up and watch Netflix. I think we need to get to a mindset where it's the normal to be lifelong learning continuously and acquiring new skills to move yourself ahead. The equivalent of waking up on a Saturday or watch Netflix, you should actually take a training on the new AI model or tool that comes out there. It sounds, why people do that, but I think, when people embrace it, I think they really see the power of that. I hope we get to a world where it becomes much more normal and people want to keep pushing themselves ahead, because that's going to eventually benefit everyone. And I think we're going to be all much better off.
Awesome. So we all look forward 10 years from now to see where Mydra is. And maybe by then you built other 10 companies. So maybe we should have another interview. But it is now time for our classic end of the episode game. And today's game is called Jobsolete. Jobsolete. So this is how it works. So we're going to tell you the name of a strange sounding job that existed in the past, or maybe not. We're going to tell you also the description of this job, and then you have to tell us if this job was real or not. So if this job actually went obsolete or if it never existed. Are you ready?
Let's go, yeah?
All right. Yannis, you want to go with that first one?
Yes, sure. Let's start. Mariano, the first one that may or may not be a job is the cloud curator. And this was a job where an assigned poetic names to clouds for public assigned poetic names to clouds for public weather reports.
Cloud curator.
Real or fake?
I would say fake.
Yes, that is correct. It's a fun idea, but no, there were some who actually did that, but no one officially curated them for aesthetics.
Okay. I got
Very
it right.
good. 1 point. All right. Next one is the knocker-upper. So this person is a person that used to wake up people before the alarm clocks were invented, and they were using a stick or a pea shooter, like green peas shooter. Was it real or not?
Knocker-upper. I think there were people waking people up, but I don't think with that green shooter. So I would say fake.
It is actually true. So it was very popular in the UK in the 1800s until the 1900s, early 1900s. And so some people were using this pea shooter, literally, and some other people were just using bamboo poles, basically, to wake up people. So
this is like in hotels when you ask them to call you to wake you up. This was the version before that then.
Exactly.
Wow, I wouldn't have imagined. I have the next one for you, Mariano. The next one is the ice cutter, and they harvested blocks of ice from frozen lakes for refrigeration purposes.
Ice cutter. Yeah, this sounds like a credible thing. Yeah, shall we say yes?
Yes, that is correct. It used to be very vital before the modern freezers, so in the 1800s, and the ice was shipped worldwide, even to India. But it was a very dangerous job as it involves saws, freezing water, and horses. So probably a lot of people were killed in the process of getting the ice shipped over to India.
Thank God we got fridges now and you done with that.
True. All right, next one. The job was rat whisperer. And basically the job of the rat whisperer was to lure rats out of the city using sound and scent. So sort of flutes, these kind of things.
Yeah, I would say yes. I can imagine this kind of job existing.
Yes, we got him. It's fake, actually. I hope we all remember the fairy tale, where actually there was the guy with the flute, But no, it's not existing. So it is based on the Pete Piper legend, and it's based a bit on modern day rat catchers. But no, it did not exist. Shall we do one more, Johannes? And then we'll see if we even it out.
Let's see if I can do this one.
The next one is called The Resurrectionist, and he or she dug up corpses to sell to medical schools for dissection. Is that a real job?
Resurrectionist. Yeah, I would say yes, but it sounds like an illegal activity because, like, it sounds like you dug up dead bodies to analyze. But why did you dig them in the first place? So it sounds like the legal version of the job.
So you're saying this is a real job?
This was like the legal version of a real job, I would say.
That is correct. But the you are already uncovering the incentives here. So there were cases in Edinburgh where people got murdered. So the resurrectionists got more and fresher bodies to ship to medical schools.
Well,
so exactly
scary stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but it exactly played out as you were referring to.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's crazy to think of that kind of jobs and things. I'm glad they don't exist, or they were fake, or they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's true, right? And it's going to be the same now with some jobs, right? Where some of them are going to become obsolete.
Yeah, I like the analogy absolutely, because obviously, for me, what's interesting, back to the conversation of jobs evolving, this is amazing to look at jobs that existed previously and completely gone, and or jobs that people saying they're normal now, but did not exist that long ago. Like the typical things like influencers, right? Like TikTokers, YouTubers,
Yeah.
like podcasters. You see, this did not exist 10, 15 years ago at all, or whatever, digital marketing, data analyst. This stuff did not exist like 20 years ago, right? So if you project into the future, like 10, 20 years, why should you expect that the jobs we do today should exist there, right? And yeah, it's nice to see how things are evolving and changing.
Love it. Thanks, Mariano. That wraps it up very nicely. Thank you so much for joining today. Everyone, thank you so much for staying with us. If you made it until the end of the video, make sure to subscribe, like, and share with your friends, your colleagues, or your family. We're just getting started out, and we're excited to bring you more interesting conversations, but we want to make sure that we build something that is truly inspirational and amazing for you. So don't be shy. Leave us your comments with ideas and feedback. We'll make sure to review all of them and improve as we go. That's it for now. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Mariano. And
Thanks for having me.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to subscribe to the AI to Go podcast.